We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 27a. And the previous summit, the Mishnah says that if a person buys produce and he finds among the produce money, he can keep the money. And Reish Lakish now says in the name of Rabbi Yanai that that's only true belokeach min hatagar if he buys it from a merchant. Avol belokeach mi balabayis, but if he buys it from a balabayis, from a private individual, chayv l'hachzer, then he does need to return it. V'chein tani tana kami de Rav Nachman. Similarly, a tana taught before Rav Nachman, lo shanu ela belokeach min hatagar. It's only true if he buys it from a merchant. Avol belokeach mi balabayis, chayv l'hachzer. But if he buys it from a balabayis, he has to return the money. Rashi explains, "V'lokech min hatagar." He buys it from a merchant. She'afu lokach tvuazu me'anoshim harbe. The point is that the tagar, the merchant, bought it from many other people. V'lo yadia demaninu. Therefore, we don't know who it belongs to. V'came into less busimin nisiyai bailam. Since there is no simin, the original owners have despaired. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said back to the Tana that taught this brayse of V'chi bal habayis bi'atzmo doshan, that the bal habayis himself, did he thresh the grain, meaning to say he has workers that thresh the grain, so therefore you don't know that the money belongs to the bal habayis. Rashi says, doshan v'chihu atzmo doshas atvu hazos, did he himself thresh this grain? Halo po'alim harbe doshua, so there were many workers that did it, so even in the case of a bal habayis, the person should be able to keep the money. And the Gemara continues, Amar le, so the Tana said back, should I delete this brisa? In other words, this Tana brings down various brises. He said maybe this brisa is not authoritative. Amar Lei said back to him, Lo, no, to targim masnisa kegon shadoshan al yedei avdo v'shivchaso aknanim. You can interpret the brisa. It's talking about where it's threshed through his slaves and through his maidservants that are kananim, and therefore anything that they lose really is property that does belong to him, and in that case it has to be returned to the balabayis. Rashi explains, Ismiya Aser brisa zumi gersasi. Should I delete this brisa from the brisas which I teach? Amar le lotis me said, no, you don't have to do that. To targim masnisa, rather you can interpret the brisa that it's talking again about avdo v'shivchaso hakananim. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Afa simla haisa bichlal kolelu. The simla, the garment, was also included in the general idea, in the generalization that you have to return lost objects. V'lama yotzasa, why was it taken out? Meaning to say, why was the simla specified in the pasuk? Lahakesh let's to compare to it. Lomar lach, to tell you, ma simla miyuchedes sheyesh ba simonin v'yesh latovin. Just like a garment is unique, it has simonim and it has people that are claiming it. Av kol davar sheyesh ba simonin v'yesh latovim chayiv lahachris. So to anything that has simonim and has people claiming it, that the person is obligated to announce. And Rashi explains, Bechlal Kalelu was included among these. B'Gemar Mefarshla, the Gemara will explain it. So Lama Yatsasa v'chein Tasa l'Simlasa. Why does the pasuk specifically say that this you do for your garment? Why is it specified? Stam Simla Yesh Ba Simin. Generally speaking, a garment has a simin. V'chol Simla Yesh La Bailam Tovanosa. And also, any garment has owners that are claiming it. Shelo Nasas Ela B'dei Adam. And the point is, it was made by people. V'lo Basim in a Hefker. It's not something that comes out of nowhere. It's not ownerless. Av Kol Sheyesh Lo Tovin. So too, this applies to anything that has someone claiming it. The point here is to exclude a situation or an object where we know that the owner has given up hope. And the Gemara says, "My bechlal kolelu." What does the Mishnah mean when it says that the garment was among all of the things that are generalized? Amar Rava says, "Bechlal kol avedas achicha," means to say that it's included in all lost objects of your brother. It would have been included, and therefore, again, we have to understand why it's specified. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, "Lama li de kasav rachmana." Why does the pasuk have to write shor, chamor, sev, simla? Why does it have to identify all of these items, the ox and the donkey and the sheep and the garment? And the Gemara says, Srichi, it's necessary. Because of Rachmana Simla, if the pasuk only wrote Simla, Havamina Hani Mili Be'edim de Gufa v'Simonim de Gufa, I would think it's only by the Edim on the item itself and the Simonim on the item itself. Aval Chamor, but when you're talking about a donkey, Be'edim de Ukaf, where the witnesses are on the saddle, the Simonim de Ukaf and the Simonim are on the saddle, Emaloma Hadrinale, I would say that doesn't have to be returned to him. Because of Rachmana Chamor, so that's why the pasuk writes Chamor, Ta'afilu Chamor b'simone ha'ukaf, even when you're talking about a donkey where there's simonim on the saddle. Sure, v'sed the cause of Rachmana Lamali. Now, why does the pasuk say an ox and a sheep? And the Gemara says, sure, the afilu legizas is anavo. When we're talking about sure, it's even for the shearings of its tail. V'sel legizosov, and a sheep for its shearings. And the Gemara says, v'lichtov rachmana sure, the afilu legizas anavo. But why doesn't the pasuk just write sure to include the shearings of its tail? V'kol shekein sel legizosov, and then certainly we would know a sheep for its shearings. And so the Gemara says, ella rather, Amar Rava says, chamor debor l'Reb Yehuda. The word chamor that's written by the damages of the boar of the pit, according to Reb Yehuda, v'sed aveda. And the word said that's written by Aveda L'divrei Hakol, that's according to everyone. Kasha, that is difficult. Those are extra words that we cannot explain. And Rashi explains, Shor v'chamor se v'simla lo sira as shor achicha oseyo v'chein tasa l'chamoro v'chein tasa l'simla. So we see in the psukim that all of these objects are identified, all of these animals and objects are identified. B'simone ukaf, then we talk about the simonim of the saddle by a donkey. Imein lo simin b'chamor, meaning let's say there's no simin on the donkey. V'yesh lo simin b'ukaf shala, but there is a simin on the saddle that's on the donkey. Kasav rachmana chamor, kra yiser l'drasha. That's why the pasuk writes chamor. It's an extra pasuk to make this drasha. And then we said legizas is a navo, shore is for the shearings of its tail. Shafilu sarsha besof hazan of yachzer, meaning even the hair at the end of its tail needs to be returned. And then the Gemara said chamor debor l'Rabbi Yehuda. The word chamor that's written by bor according to Rabbi Yehuda, to mechayev al niskei kalim bebor. The point is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, by a bor a person is chayev to pay for damages to kalim, to vessels, and so therefore we don't know what we need the word chamor for. Chamor is generally used chamor v'lo kalim. The drush is shor v'lo adam, chamor v'lo kalim. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't have the drush of chamor v'lo kalim, so kasha lan lanayasa. So it's a kasha according to Rabbi Yehuda, meaning we have a question. According to Rabbi Yehuda, what's that word chamor for? Te'ilu l'rabbanan miboilu shor v'lo adam chamor v'lo kalim. As we just said, according to the Rabbanan, we use it for the drush of shor v'lo adam chamor v'lo kalim. And so again, that's a question within Rabbi Yehuda. And then we have a general question according to everyone. There is a question, what do we do with the word seh that is written by Aveda? And the Gemara continues, Ve'ema leglolim huda'asa, let us say that the word seh in the pasuk is to include glolim, that the dung has to be returned. And to that the Gemara says, glolim afkure mafkirlu, the dung, that the person actually renders ownerless, it does not need to be returned. V'dilma l'simonim huda'asa, maybe the word seh is coming to teach us the idea of returning something with simonim. Di boilam, because we do have a question, simonim d'oraisa or d'rabanan, is the concept of simonim, is that a d'oraisa concept or a d'rabanan concept? Kasav Rachmana said, da'afilu b'simonim mahadrin, and maybe the pasuk is writing the word seh to say that you return something even due to the simonim, the simonim d'oraisa, and the pasuk is saying that simonim are d'oraisa. And the Gemara says to that, Amri, they say, midukatani lahu tana l'simonin, gabe simla, from the fact that the Tana mentions simonim by simla, by the garment, the katani, because it says ma simla miyuchedis, it says that a garment is unique, sheyesh ba simonin, v'yesh latovin, it has simonim and it has people claiming it, chayiv lahachers, and it has to be announced, af kol davar sheyesh ba simonin, v'yesh latovin, chayiv lahachers. So to anything with simonim and tovim, the person needs to announce, and so that's mentioned by simla. So shma mina, so we see from there the seh lav l'simonin hu da'asa, that the word seh is not coming to teach us anything about simonim. And Rashi explains, leglolim for the dung, lahachzer eskololov, meaning you have to return the dung, the kasav shor, havamina kiyasa legizas is anavoas. If it would have said just shor, I would have thought that comes to teach us the shearings by the tail. Aval galolim lo chashivi v'lo lahader, but the dung is not important, doesn't need to be returned. Kasav rachmana kra yiseir lasuya galolim, so the extra word in the pasuk is to teach us the dung. And the Gemara says, no, afkure mafkirlu, that already is rendered ownerless, lamisha tarchbo, for whoever took care of the animal, he essentially made it ownerless to that person. That person can claim it. V'loasa krala ribuyinu de'ein lo tovenu, and the pasuk is not coming to include dung because that's something that's not even being claimed. And then the Gemara suggested l'simonin also, maybe it's to teach us simonim lashminon de lahadre b'simonin below edim, meaning to teach us to return the item with simonim, with no witnesses. To kami boilon l'kamon, because that's a question to us later on. Simonin de'oraiso de'rabonan, are simonim de'oraiso de'rabonan, uva'inon l'mifshat mimas nisan di'yolef l'misimla, and then we try to answer it from the Mishnah where we're learning it out from Simla. V'dachinan v'yamar Tana tovin itzrichalei, and we're going to say that we're going to push that off and say that the Tana was really focusing on tovin, on people claiming the item, and simonin kedei naspa, and simonim was just brought along, it was just added on in the wording of the Mishnah, and so therefore the Gemara is going to say that it's not really a proof from Simla. So nifshot mikra yisera desel simonim asa v'simonim deoraisa. So therefore, again, that's going to be a question later. The Gemara is going to try to prove it from Simla and say it's not really a proof. Why not learn from the word seh that simonim are deoraisa? And the Gemara says to that, Amri, they say midenaka tana b'masnisin lamelaf simonim isimla bahade tovin. From the fact that the Mishnah grouped together simonim and tovin when talking about simla, pshita le desel lemilsa achrisi asa. It is obvious from the wording of the Mishnah that seh must be for something else. V'anan hu delo yadin, we just don't know what seh is for, but it's clear from the Mishnah that says not for simonim. Misham hachi lo pshita le lakamon simonim miseh. That's why it's not obvious to us later on that simonim comes from seh. Hilkach kasha Shalom Lamaya. So that's why it's difficult to us. What is sef for? And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanu Rabban and the rabbis taught Asher Tova that you lose the object. Pradli Aveda Shein Bashav Pruta, that comes to exclude a lost object that's not worth a pruta. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mitzasa. Rabbi Yehuda says that's learned from the word Mitzasa. You find the object. Pradli Aveda Shein Bashav Pruta comes to exclude a lost object that is not worth a pruta. Rashi explains Asher Tova Shtei Kruya Aveda means it has to be called a lost object, has to be worth a pruta. Umitzasa, you find the object. Shetei Kruya Metziah, it has to be called a found object. Again, it has to be worth a pruta. And the Gemara continues, My Beinayu, what's the difference between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda? Amar Abaya says, Mashmos Dorshanika Beinayu, it's just a difference between them, how you make the drasha. Mar Nafkale Me Asher Tovad, one learns it from Asher Tovad, Mar Nafkale Me Umitzasa, and one learns it from the pasuk which says Umitzasa. The Gemara says, Ulaman de Nafkale Me Asher Tovad. Now, according to the one who learns it from Asher Tovad, Hay Umitzasa My Avidli, so what does he do with the word Umitzasa? And the Gemara says to that, Ahumi Boy Leilechid Rav Noi, that comes to teach us what Rav Noi taught. The Amar Rav Noi said Umitzasa. What does it mean when it says in the pasuk Umitzasa? Da'asoi liyadei mashma. It implies that it came to the person's hand. Rashi explains, Da'asa liyadei mashma, it came to the person's hand. V'afilu hachi, nevertheless, achicha v'lo v'kochavim. The halacha of Hashavatz Aved applies to your brother, applies to Jewish people. It does not apply to the idol worshiper, to the non-Jew. V'limedcha she'avedas kanani mutaris. What it's teaching us is that the aved of a kanani is mutar to take. V'lo teimo ki imot avedas kanani militroach acharei imot. Now, don't say that maybe the aved of a kanani is just excluded, that you don't have to bother to pursue it. Maybe you would say that if it actually came to your hand, if you have it, you have to return it. That's what we're saying in Mitzasa. It came to the person's hand, and still, it only applies to the lost object of a Jew. It does not apply to the lost object of a non-Jew. And the Gemara continues, and according to the one who learns it from the pasuk of Umitzasa, this idea of Shava Pruta, Hay Asher Tovad My Avidle, so what does he do with the pasuk of Asher Tovad? Mi boy lei l'chid Rabbi Yochanan, he uses it for the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan. The Yom Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, because Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Minayin li Aveda shashat fanar. How do you know if you have an Aveda that's swept away by the flooding river Shim Muteres? How do you know that is mutter? Shenemar, like it says in the pasuk, Ein tazal chol Aveda sachicha Asher Tovad mimenu mitzasa. It says that this is true of all the Avedas of your brothers, and we understand that to mean, again, we're learning from the words Asher Tovad, Misha Avuda heimenu umitzuya etzel kol adam. The rules of Hashavas Aveda apply to an item that is lost from your brother, but it's found by other people. That comes to exclude a case where it's swept away by the river. There it is lost from him, and it's also not found by anybody else. It's essentially lost from everyone, so there the halacha of returning does not apply. Rashi says, Misha avuda mimenu va'idi dekasa mimenu kasav asher tovat. Since it says the word mimenu, that's why it says asher tovat. Essentially, we're learning from mimenu. And the Gemara continues, V'idach, so the other Tana had Rav Noi Minoli. So where does he learn the teaching of Rav Noi? Again, Rav Noi's teaching was that it's the Asal Yadei Mashma. So the Gemara says to that, Nafkalei mi umetzas. He learns it out from the extra Vav in the Pasuk. Rashi says, Umetzasa have Vav Yisera, the Vav is extra. Mashma umetzasa kfar sounds like it's already been found, meaning to say, again, it already came to the person's hand. V'idach, and the other Tana had Rav Yochanan Minoli. Where does he learn out the teaching of Rav Yochanan, that again, if it's swept away by the river, so then you don't have to return it. Nafkalei mi mimenu. He learns that out from the word mimenu in the pasuk. V'idach mimenu lo mashmalei. The other one says that the mimenu, that's not enough to teach that halacha. And the Gemara continues, Rava Amar Rava says, Pruta shehuz la'ika beinayu. There actually is a difference between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda and the Braisa. The difference is, let's say at the time it was lost, it was worth a pruta, but then it depreciates in value. Man damar me asher tovad, the one who learns from asher tovad, so ika, so at the time it was lost, it actually was worth a pruta. So there's a mitzvah hashavas aveda. Uman damar mi umitzasa, but the one who learns from the word umitzasa in the pasuk, that when it's found it has to be a pruta. So leka, in this case, it is not worth a pruta at the time that it was found. But the Gemara asks, but the one who says, who learns it from Asher Tovad, don't you need to fulfill the pasuk of umitzasa? You need to fulfill the idea that at the time that it's found, it's worth a pruta. You don't have that. And so the Gemara says, you're right, everyone would actually agree in this case that there's no hashavas aved if it's not worth a pruta when it's found. Ela pruta shehukra ika benai. So the Gemara suggests the difference actually is if it went up in value, meaning when it was lost, it was not worth a pruta, but it was worth a pruta when it was found. Man damar umitzasa ika, the one who learns from umitzasa, so it's worth a pruta. Uman damar asher tovad leka, the one who learns from asher tovad, at the time it was lost, it was not a pruta. But the Gemara asks the same as before, Laman damar umitzasa, but even according to the one who says umitzasa, haboinan asher tovad v'leka, but you need it also when it's lost to be a pruta, and you don't have that. So everyone should agree in this case as well that it was not worth a pruta at the time it was lost, and there's no hashavas aveda. And so instead the Gemara says, the difference is, let's say it was a pruta when it was lost, and then what happened was it went down in value, so in the interim it was not a pruta, and then it went back up in value when it was found, so at that time also was worth a pruta. That will be a nafkamina between the two opinions. Man damar asher tovad ika, the one who says that we learn pruta from the time that it was lost, so that's true in this case. At the time it was lost, it was worth a pruta, and at the time it was found, it was worth a pruta. Uman damar umetzasa, but the one who learns it from umetzasa, but inon de ispa shir Metziah mishas aveda v'achas Metziah, you actually need it to be worth a pruta the entire time, from the time that it's lost all the way until the time that it's found, and therefore even if in the interim it goes down below the value of a pruta, there's going to be no mitzvah of hashavas aveda. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, the following question, simonin d'oraisa d'rabbanan, is the concept of simonim, is that midoraisa or is that midrabbanan? The Gemara says, my nafkamina, what is the difference, whether it is d'oraisa or d'rabbanan? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Zayin Amid Beis.